are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Push notifications have gone out on YouTube, Facebook. We're across the state of Arkansas right now. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. My name is Paul Harrell, and you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. Headline, oil prices hit the highest since November as U.S. plans to tighten Iran restrictions. That's from the headline from CNBC. You know, I drive past the same gas station every day, and now I'm seeing this thing get up close to $2.50, and I just think to myself, thanks a lot, Arkansas legislature. Thank you, guys, because thanks to you, in October, we're going to be paying an estimated 3 cents more at the pump. So whatever you're seeing now on the little marquees, just tack on 3 cents. If you're a diesel driver, you terrible environmental, you anti-environmentalists, you need to tack on 6 cents. So thanks a lot, 92nd General Assembly. I'm sure it's going to go and pay for road projects that will come here eventually. More on that later, by the way, because there's now going to be this big push to get you to vote for a half-cent sales tax that's set to expire. But they don't want it to expire, so they put it back on the ballot just to make sure when you voted the first time that you really wanted it to sunset. Are you sure that when you voted the first time for the tax for specific projects that you wanted it to sunset? Are you sure? And, of course, we're going to hear that if you're not for the half-cent sales tax, then you're not for jobs because it goes to the roads and everything else. And all I have to say is this. We're already giving you money to build our roads. Why do you continue to ask for more? The telephone number this morning, 870-275-9799. They had a big Democrat town hall. And Kamala Extract Harris, who is, high on Kamala Extract. Apparently, Kamala Extract, I didn't know this, if you're a big Battlestar Galactica fan like I am, I didn't realize that if you take Kamala Extract, your name becomes Kamala Extract, and you want to take people's guns away. Listen to what Kamala Extract Harris had to say when she was asked this question from a concerned person. Listen to this.
2 days ago for mass shootings. 2 days ago was the 20th anniversary of the Columbine massacre, but still 2 decades later, no major gun control legislation has been passed. So my question is, as president, how will you go about keeping our schools safe and keeping guns out of the hands of those who should not have them?
Thank you, Ben. And I'm sure that there are plenty of students here who, while you were in high school, even middle school, that you had to participate in a drill, right? Where you were convened and your teachers taught you about how you need to go and run in a closet because there may be a mass shooter roaming the hallways of your school. And in our America, that should never have to happen. Conversations take place every night. Conversations take place every night between students and their parents. Why do these things have to happen? Why do we have to have a drill like that? To which, of course, the response is because there are people in Washington, D.C., supposed leaders, who have failed to have the courage to reject a false choice, which suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away.
Well, that's pretty much it.
Supposed leaders in Washington, D.C., who have failed to have the courage to recognize, you know what, you want to go hunting, that's fine. But we need reasonable gun safety laws in this country, starting with universal background checks and a renewal of the assault weapon ban. But they have failed to have the courage to act. So, Ben, here's my response to you. Upon being elected, I will give the United States Congress 100 days to get their act together and have the courage to pass reasonable gun safety laws. And if they fail to do it, then I will take executive action.
Right.
And specifically what I will do is put in place a requirement that for anyone who sells more than 5 guns a year,
what else?
They are required to do background checks when they sell those guns.
Would that solve the problem?
I will require that for any gun dealer that breaks the law, the ATF take their license. And by the way, ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Well, the ATF has been doing a lot of the A and the T, but not much of the F.
She knows what it stands for. Oh, my goodness.
And then
she knows what ATF stands for. Wow. She's qualified to be president. Wow, look at her. And
on the third piece, because none of us have been sleeping over the last 2 years.
Because Donald Trump's elected and you've got Trump derangement syndrome.
Is they took fugitives.
You can't sleep.
Off the list of prohibited people.
Going to therapy.
I put them back on the list, meaning that fugitives from justice should not be able to purchase a handgun or any kind of weapon. So that's what I do.
Would this be your first executive action as president?
All right, stop. Donald Trump keeping therapists in business since 2016. Okay, a couple things here. This is the biggest thing that jumps out at me. The Democrats are a bunch of phonies. They're a bunch of phonies. Her suggestion, first of all, let's get past the whole executive order thing and everything else, right? Let's get past how ridiculous that is. But let's just say if Congress or her were to put in this restriction on people who sell more than 5 guns a year, would that have solved San Bernardino, or would those Muslim terrorists still would have gone into that work building and killed everybody? Would they still have had? Yes, absolutely, they still would have had access to weapons. You see, this is what I say they're phony. I'm specifically referring to the fact that the reason the choice, she says, is a straw man, but it's not. You're either for the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. Because if you're going to try to stop mass shootings, your only way to do it is to attempt to take everyone's guns away. Now, that wouldn't... obviously, if you could say we've collected every single gun and legitimately actually achieve that goal, which is impossible... But if you were, you would be able to say, okay, no, there's not going to be any more killings with guns, right? But they're never going to be able to get that because the criminals will always have it. Law-abiding citizens would turn them over. Well, probably not in America, but you get my point, right? So she's putting this out there that's not the choice. We need reasonable, not gun control. They changed the term. It's now gun safety, a la global cooling, global warming, climate change. And now we have a situation where she's proposing something that would not have stopped the mass shootings that we have witnessed in this country. And she uses the pain point politics, the emotional heartstrings, not the actual logic, not actually critical thinking. No one should have to live in an America where you have to go through drills in case a mass shooter is, because the government has the solutions. And if we just had the courage, the government could prevent bad things from happening by correcting the evil in someone's heart that makes them go and take up arms to begin with. No, the answer is no. It's preposterous. An armed society is a polite society, but let's just get back to the point at hand. If you are proposing new gun control measures that don't actually stop or wouldn't have stopped the tragedies you're talking about, you're a big phony. You're an absolute phony. And that's what these Democrats do, because she's suggesting something that wouldn't fix the problem that she has a giant issue with. And in order to actually fix her issue, she has to go down a different path that is much further left than what she's presenting to the public last night. And what that is what the radical left wants, which is the elimination of the Second Amendment. Period. The left wants the people she's talking to. They don't think there should be a Second Amendment at all. And that, if you want to go hunting, fine. Yeah, it's fine until what? Until there's a mass shooting close to my location, and then we're gonna amp up or ramp up the gun restrictions so I can't go hunting. Hunting is fine until you radical leftists decide that it's not fine somehow. Just like the Second Amendment is fine until it's not fine. Just you'll have to excuse me if I'm a little bit skepticism. We're talking about. First of all, when we talk about the Second Amendment, it's important to remember we're talking about the natural human right, self-preservation and self-defense. It doesn't come from you. It doesn't come from government. It comes from God. It comes from the Creator. It comes from a higher power. And that's another thing that these Democrats fail to understand. But they are phonies. We know that on so many levels. But they are really phonies here. If you're proposing a gun regulation in the context of trying to stop mass shootings, and the gun regulation itself won't actually stop mass shootings, the ones that have happened, then you're a giant phony. And I think you're not being honest with us. That's what I think. Matter of fact, over at Breitbart.com, Ari Hawkins, let's see, we have this. It should be noted that none of the controls Harris wants to put in place via executive action in the first 100 days would have stopped a single mass shooting in recent memory. Moreover, her favorite gun control universal background checks has been in place in California since the 1990s and did not prevent any high-profile shootings that the state has witnessed during the last 2 decades. So, anyway, just another example of, more of what we already know. Mexico, moving on. Mexican soldiers, an update on Mexican soldiers who detained American soldiers on the U.S. side of the border, according to reports. By the way, you want to give a nod to our board, failure of leadership. Does the Arkansas, is Arkansas in the midst of failure of leadership? Tell me what you think. Facebook.com/Conduit News. I'm talking about all, massive Republican majorities and the amount of money the amount of money they're raising our taxes in terms of a net tax increase. And we'll talk more about that in the days to come. The Mexican government, according to Conservative Review and Daniel Horowitz. Okay, here's a more detailed update from the story we brought you yesterday. The Mexican government is powerless to control the cartels at the border, but somehow when it comes to belligerently confronting our own soldiers on our own soil, the Mexicans seem to muster the personnel and temerity to defend their side of the border. Moreover, they apparently have the unbridled impudence to complain about armed American citizens defending our border while they have permanently transformed our country in the worst way imaginable through their disrespect of our sovereignty. This is clearly no longer about immigration, but about a pure invasion that requires a military buildup. That's a pretty stark claim right there. That's a pretty bold accusation. Let's continue reading. On April 13th, around 2 p.m. Central Time, a group of 5 or 6 suspected Mexican soldiers approached an unmarked vehicle of 2 U.S. soldiers stationed at the border in El Paso County, Texas, and ordered them out of the vehicle. According to Newsweek, which obtained the serious incident report, the soldiers were, in fact, active duty members of B Battery, 1st Battalion, 37th Field Artillery Regiment, not from a National Guard unit. That's interesting. The Mexican soldiers disarmed one of the U.S. soldiers and placed his sidearm in the U.S. vehicle. While the soldiers were parked south of the border fence near Clint, Texas, they were north of the Rio Grande riverbed, which placed them appropriately in U.S. territory, according to Major Mark Lazane, a spokesman for Northcom. Customs and Border Protection and the Department of Defense, after inquiring of the Mexican government, were informed that the Mexican soldiers thought that the Americans were south of the border. Throughout the incident, the U.S. soldiers followed all established procedures and protocols. Okay, so Mexican soldiers don't know how to navigate their own country. They don't know that they're north of their border. That doesn't make any sense. Northcom confirmed that there are approximately 2,800 service members assigned to the border mission. Quote, this includes approximately 1,200 on the mobile surveillance camera mission, plus about 1,000 service members hardening ports of entry in Texas and New Mexico. There are approximately 200 personnel as part of the crisis response force, with the remainder being headquartered and logistics personnel supporting the mission. When I asked, again, Mr. Horowitz here, when I asked both Northcom and the State Department if our government had conveyed our concerns to Mexico and asked for an apology, both departments declined to comment. Zach Taylor, a retired 26-year veteran of Border Patrol, has informed a group of retired border agents to better educate the public on the border. He told the Conservative Review that he is convinced these Mexican soldiers were making a political statement. Quote, at the reported location, the Rio Grande River is distinct and easily identified in relation to the actual international boundary, asserted Taylor, who still lives near the Arizona border. That one of the supposed Mexican soldiers took one sidearm from an American and put it in the American vehicle is curious, as if the Mexicans knew exactly who they had encountered, where they were encountered, and were simply making a statement. What the purpose of that statement was is open to broad speculation, but on the face of it, this was probably political, as in showing that to Mexico, borders mean nothing. Taylor confirmed that he regularly saw this behavior during his time in the Border Patrol. We have tens of thousands of soldiers stationed in other parts of the world, fully equipped for war and with at least manageable rules of engagement. Why are the soldiers at our own border too few, so lightly armed, and seeking to de-escalate a potentially volatile situation of Mexican aggression rather than deterring it? What is particularly disturbing about this incident is that one could defend Mexico's powerless response to this border crisis and the robust cartel and smuggler activity as a lack of resources to secure its own border from non-state actors. But why is it that the Mexican government suddenly has the ability to cross into our own country and detain our own personnel, but is seemingly powerless to deal with the cartels on its own border? That's a great question. I know you have the federales, the Mexican soldiers, and you have, they're all in black because they have to protect themselves or their family from reprisals, and they're at war, or they try to police, or they try to battle the Mexican cartel, some very violent people. We would be stupid, though. We would be very, very stupid if we thought that the line between a federale and a cartel member doesn't get blurry sometimes. Maybe. There's a lot of money being exchanged down there. A lot of money changing hands. Go to Forbes. How companies can lead fight against $150 billion human trafficking trade. Just wanted to point out, it's $150 billion human trafficking. And that's what we estimate. And that's based on statistics that we know. We got a vast border down there, don't we? We have a vast border that's unsecure in a lot of places. So you don't know what you don't know. You don't know how many children are being smuggled in sex trafficked, and sold for their bodies. $150 billion a year industry. That's what we're talking about, folks. That money goes a long way when you look at some of the salaries these people who work for Mexico make. Something to think about. Telephone number 870-275-9799. This is Conduit News Radio. Back in a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I have this headline here from last week. Trump renews Federal Reserve attacks amid controversy over his two picks. These two picks, Stephen Moore, the Wall Street Journal. If you ever had the chance to listen to Stephen Moore speak, I have. It's really, really awesome. Herman Cain, who I had the pleasure of driving to the airport at one point. I had a great conversation with him. Of course, I think these picks are great. I think they'd be fantastic to go on the board of the Federal Reserve. Of course, just like anything President Trump tries to get done, if it's going to significantly change the status quo, he faces a lot of opposition. Here now with more on that, we have, I want to introduce you to the director of the Center for Economic Freedom at Freedom.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so there is a few of your comments here on Facebook. Tim writing that my Second Amendment right has nothing to do with hunting. That's in response to Kamala Extract Harris. Listen, I know. Listen, a lot of you, I'm going to continue doing it because it's just my nickname for her. But if you haven't ever seen Battlestar Galactica, you do need to watch it. Not for the obscure reference that eventually you get. That you get with this Kamala extract, but because it's not supposed to be pronounced Kamala, she wants you to pronounce her name Kamala. No, I'm not going to do that. Kamala Extract Harris. But if you've never seen Battlestar Galactica, the one from the early 2000s where they reimagined from the original series, it's a fantastic show. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. It's one of my top 5 television shows ever. 870-275-9799. Also, Gene writing, are the Mexicans trying to provoke another war with the United States, and will the Democrats fight for Mexico? I don't know. A lot of people also here don't think that those Mexican soldiers were actually Mexican soldiers. They think they were cartel, which is an even bigger deal if cartel members disarmed members of the American military on the American side of our border, on U.S. soil. And why is it standard protocol? I agree with this. Why is it standard protocol to surrender your weapon to invaders if you're a U.S. military soldier on the border? Why is that your instruction? Now, hey, listen, I get it. We know how fast things could ramp up or escalate if, in fact, things turned violent down there. It would have been a big deal. But I just can't imagine. I mean, I think most Americans don't believe that a U.S. soldier should basically surrender to people who are approaching as invaders, who are on the United States side of the border, and give up their weapon. That doesn't make any sense. And again, this guy says that it's a political statement. He thinks that the Mexicans were making a political statement. Now, you got to remember, this is on the heels of the FBI arresting a member of a militia. Oh, by the way, all of a sudden the left now, they're against militias. They're all for the militia. The Second Amendment's not for individual ownership. The Second Amendment is for militias. You're not reading the Constitution correctly. The Second Amendment is for militias. No, all I'm saying is it's funny now they're not for militias when they're actually militias, on the border. And they're, of course, anyway, so the FBI is, they arrested this guy for, it's a group of people that will detain illegals crossing until the Border Patrol gets there, and people are like, vigilante justice. These are vigilantes. It's like, well, they're doing the job that the federal government won't do. This is such a huge problem. Folks, I'm telling you, this illegal immigration thing is nuts. It's absolutely nuts that we have politicians in Washington, D.C., that are talking about Medicare for all. They want to invent new rights that the government owes you, while our government has abdicated the most basic thing a country is supposed to do, which is secure the border and control who gets to come in and who gets to go out. Like, that's the most basic thing that our government's supposed to do. They can't fulfill that, but they want to say, well, we have new responsibilities to you. I mean, it's total madness. It makes absolutely no sense. We have people taking positions only based on manipulating the populations that are going to vote for them. That's why they won't fix their problems. Trump wanted to fix DACA, wanted to give the Democrats what they wanted against what I thought was good. And the Democrats said, no deal, because you're Trump and because we'd rather these people be victims, so they'll vote for us. Works. His name is John Tamney. John, welcome to the program this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Glad that you could take the time to talk to us. So tell us a little bit about this. What are your thoughts on these two picks?
Well, my first thought is I think we always vastly overstate the importance of the Fed one way or the other. And I think we insult ourselves when we pretend that we're reliant on a bunch of central bankers to enable us to achieve economic growth. And so that's the first thing I say. I think Jeff Bezos would have been great without it. I think Walmart would be the great story it is with or without a Fed, and so would have John D. Rockefeller. But I do think it's important that different voices basically be part of an entity that employs more economists than any other in the world. The monolithic view at the Fed is that economic growth causes inflation. How exciting to have Steve Moore and Herman Cain there who disagree with that and to force a different discussion on occasion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly right. And, for a long time, I've said this before. I think I read this somewhere a long, long time ago. The Fed, tweaking those interest rates, like, with the precision that we would maybe tweak our thermometer in our homes. You know what I mean? As if they really are kind of the idea that is out there, John, is that they're in a way, these puppet masters and that sort of thing. But what part of the Fed is actually about the free market at this point?
You can't really say anything about the Fed is about the free market, and you hit on something that's important. The Fed tweaking interest rates. Let's remember, when we borrow money, we're not borrowing money. We're borrowing what money can be exchanged for. We're borrowing access to trucks, tractors, computers, desks, chairs, to human resources. The Fed can't increase or shrink that. And so this idea that we would give a bunch of Fed officials the role of setting the short rate for the cost of credit, on its own, it's not a serious one. And so I'm hoping within this also that we can just have a discussion. My view, I don't think the Fed is the source of all of our economic ills, but why do we have one in the first place? It serves no useful purpose. Why would we have those not close to the markets setting the price of one of the most important market prices in the world?
Here's the thing. They like to pretend. I mean, I've always heard, Republican administrations, Democrat administrations, the Fed is not about politics. They're nonpartisan. Is that true?
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Our good friend Tim Loggins points out on Facebook that if the situation at the border is reported, if it's accurate that you had 5 U.S. soldiers and only one sidearm between them, it might make sense to, de-escalate the situation if the Mexicans who are trespassing, who are invading, all have rifles. So that leads you to the next question, which is why don't our boys down there, why aren't they properly armed if they're going to be, they're going to be down there? Anyway, we'll get to more of this a little later in the program. Folks, welcome back to the program. We have Rabbi Ari Spiro on the line. Rabbi Spiro, good morning. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm fine.
It's always great to have you on, sir. I wanted to talk a little bit about, and this has kind of made the headlines, this is a couple weeks ago, but we have this Ilhan Omar. She's taken a lot of attacks recently because she keeps saying things that are ridiculous when she describes the 9/11 terrorist attacks as, quote, some people did something. How do you feel about that?
Well, as an American, I think it's dreadful that we have someone in Congress who so trivializes this event. It's just some things, some people. It's not some people. It was 19 Islamic young men, mostly from Saudi Arabia, doing the work of jihad, and it was done to our country. It wasn't something. 3,000 people were killed, and comes from a woman who has said that America is a hateful and racist place. We took her in. She was a refugee, or she was part of a civil war in Somalia or Yemen, and we did not have to take her in. Not at all. She wasn't a U.S. citizen. She asked for asylum, even though she was not personally being persecuted. She was just part of a civil war. It was a civil war between two different warring Muslim sides. She's Muslim. And we took her in, and she now has said that we're hateful and racist. And she's a person that has terrible things to say about America, and she feels very eager to tell us. And so it's terrible. Listen, in my opinion, she is what we call a soft jihadist. She's not someone who's going to do the actual terrorism, but she insinuates herself into our institutions, tries to demoralize the American people. It's all part of the strategy. Your country's no good. We're hateful. We're racist. And what's happened to your country from the hands of Islam is really insignificant. It's just some people did something. And this is happening all around the world. People of her type come to a country in the West and try from within to demoralize it, condemn it. And what gets me is that the Democrat Party still allows her to thrive. Nobody's kicking her out after all of her anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, her cavalier, trivializing attitude towards 9/11. And it makes me believe that either they want the Islamic vote so badly that that's more important than the feelings of the average American, or they agree. And I bet you a lot of Democrats do agree if you listen to them.
Yeah.
They think America is a hateful, racist place, and they're glad that she's saying it for them.
Yeah. No, I think she's definitely, and then she's obviously representing, her constituents. She feels like, I mean, this is, in many ways, she's probably heard all these things her entire life, and she's got a lot of people that are voting for her that believe this nonsense. We're talking with Rabbi Ari Spiro. He's the president of Caucus for America, spokesman for the National Conference of Jewish Affairs, and the author of Pushback, Reclaiming Our American Judeo-Christian Ethos. Now, Rabbi Spiro, obviously over the weekend, we had these what apparently are terrorist attacks coordinated in Sri Lanka. What were your thoughts upon that news?
Well, I figured it was part of the radical Islamic community, and it was in the name of jihad, Allah. They specifically attacked a church and Christian worshipers on that day. It's all part of the jihad to say that we, the jihadists, our religion is in charge, and that you're infidels and you have to be destroyed. We know that over 800 churches in France over this last year have been vandalized, either burnt, statues have been torn down, broken. It wasn't through the hands of regular Frenchmen. This stuff never happened in France or in Germany until there was this Muslim migration. It's obvious, except to those that don't want to see it because they don't have the stomach. They're afraid to deal with it. They don't want to be called a name. They'd rather the churches be burned, that people be killed. They'd rather see that than have to do something about it. Now, they don't want it to happen, but if it does, they're not going to acknowledge it because they don't want to do anything. They're afraid. Or they don't care. Mm-hmm. In many situations, people in the West simply don't care. After all, it's just Christians. If a mosque is attacked, my God, they're there in the first second bemoaning it and pointing a finger at Western society. But when Islamic elements do that to Christian sites or to Jewish sites or to Western sites, somehow they accept it.
Yeah.
They have no self-respect.
There's no question as far as the American media coverage goes. The mosque shooting in New Zealand, we heard for at least a solid week, if not more, about the dangers of anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia. And you're certainly not hearing that after the Sri Lanka attacks on Christians.
They don't care. I think it's a very frightening thing when the people of your own country people in the West, they don't care when their own people are killed or their churches or synagogues are destroyed at the hands of Islam. They feel so little regard for their own religion and their own people. You know what happens? In the name of civil rights or human rights or social justice, these people put themselves off for everybody else but their own, because you don't get brownie points sticking up for your own. Oh, you get these virtue brownie points if you stick up for someone else. But then over time, it might start out because of virtue signaling, brownie points. Then you end up only feeling something for others, but never for your own people. And we're at a point in Western history here where a lot of the big shots, the elites and the media, they don't care anymore about Christianity, the West. They're demonizing people for being white. Can you imagine? You hear it all the time. You're white this and white that and white privilege. It's bigotry. It's bigotry against the white race or whatever you want to call it. And it seems to be okay.
The Notre Dame Cathedral, I the last I heard, Rabbi Spiro, was that they thought it was some sort of computer glitch that caused the fire. Have you heard anything new as to what actually caused this, and do you believe the official story?
Well, you're probably not going to hear the truth right away. While the flames were still burning, the French police said, oh, this had nothing to do with terrorism. How did they know that? There wasn't even an investigation yet. The flames were still burning. How did they know that? They didn't. But they didn't want any possible finger, to be pointed at Islamic terrorists, even though there were threats from the Islamic community to destroy churches, especially on Holy Weeks. As a way to see, you say, we are victorious. Our God, Allah, is victorious over the Christian God or the Jewish God. So I don't know what happened. But I tell you, I think it's highly unlikely that the people in charge of restoring Notre Dame were so unprofessional that what? There was a cigarette, there was a computer glitch. I mean, these people are so careful.
Yes.
When they're dealing with these types of institutions. So, but we weren't even given a chance. So I'm very suspect, specifically because right away they said, it's not arson, it's not terrorism. How do they know?
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you take into account the amount of churches that have been vandalized and fires that have been started in France at churches, you do think you've got to pursue the facts where they lead. But I'm like you. I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it because of the Yellow Vest protesters. Now, I think many of them assumed this weekend when they went back to the streets, many of them assumed we're never going to get the full story. But if it actually came out that it was, in fact, arson, I think it would just inflame the rest of the country and the elites. They're trying to control the people at this point. What do you think the Yellow Vest protesters, Rabbi Ari Spiro, what do you think they're protesting at this point? They've been doing this a long time.
Well, they're protesting a Macron and a group of elitists that care little about the French people. Macron is a globalist. When he makes decisions, he doesn't care how it affects the common worker in France, the Frenchman. He makes a decision based on his globalism, his transnationalism, how it fits with the world leaders he's impressed with, like an Angela Merkel or some of the other leaders, or how the Islamic community feels about it. That's what's uppermost in his decision-making. This is happening all across the West, where the leaders no longer care about their own native population, their blue-collar people, their workers. They are making decisions based on what makes them look good in a globalist fraternity. And they're just letting their people be passed by as if they don't count. That's what Obama was exactly. He couldn't care less about the American worker, the American people. Hillary Clinton said to the miners, basically go to hell. we don't want you to do any coal mining in Kentucky, West Virginia, Southern Ohio. We'll put you on welfare, but we're going to regulate your industry out of existence. We don't care about you, your families. The decision was based on this global environmentalism, and people are sick of it.
Do you think the Frenchmen, the Yellow Vesters, do you think they look across at us and they see Donald Trump? Do you think they're fans of Donald Trump and what he's doing or attempting to do for the American middle class?
I don't know, because they are French. And French have been very anti-American.
Yeah.
And so we can't always say that, hey, those are our counterparts, our buddies over there. If it would be England, I would say that those that are doing that are empathetic and identify with the blue-collar workers here and the middle class here. But it's French. And French have been notoriously anti-American, and they do things as Frenchmen, which is okay with me. But since Lafayette, they really haven't been our partners in anything.
Yeah, I think you're right. In terms of the way they protest, I mean, there have been people that have been killed, turned to violence and vandalism, and that's just kind of how the French do it. I mean, there's a huge difference between the American Revolution, how that was handled, and then the French Revolution.
No, French Revolution was based on terror, and the American Revolution was based on reason. But the Yellow Vests have now been infected by a lot of Islamists. They're always there to try to turn over a country. So it started out as something in behalf of the workers and the middle class, but a lot of the jihadists, a lot of the radical Muslim community have joined on in any way they can, because they see an opportunity to sow confusion and agitation and misery in a country. So it's not as pure today, the Yellow Vest movement, as it was in the beginning.
Well, I'm glad you put that caveat in, because nobody really knows what to think. The American media doesn't really want to cover it at all, because if there's even a chance that these people are taken to the streets because of globalism, and the fact is a lot of the French policies are policies that the American media and some, the new Marxists want over here. And so if the people of France start rejecting those policies, and I think that's why you have this blockade of what's going on over there. But let me ask you one last question. We're talking with Rabbi Ari Spiro. His book is Pushback, Reclaiming Our American Judeo-Christian Ethos. Now, in light of that, I found it just a little bit ironic, Ari, when you had the fire, the cathedral was burning, and the media was so upset. They were putting the coverage out there about what a big deal it was that Notre Dame was on fire, and I just couldn't help but think to myself, wait a second, this is a building that represents a religion that you guys don't want in public life, that you don't like it in any sort of mainstream, because you can't express faith in public life, right? That's something that you've got to keep to yourself, or keep in your synagogue, or keep in your church. Did you kind of see that hypocrisy there a little bit?
Well, Macron never referred to it basically as a religious institution or a church. To him, it was a national monument, a symbol of their history. It's a beautiful place where people come, tourists come to see, and there's a certain pride in that. But he didn't even define it in a way as an attack on Christianity or a church, an attack on our God. He didn't. And that's not the aspect that got him. Actually, they're very secular, unfortunately, in France. And they got a bunch of empty churches that are now becoming mosques. Listen, the country only survives if it has an identity. And religion, that's a good way to identify yourself. And if you don't have it, you're just vapid and naked, and Islam will come in and take over.
Well, and I was looking at that cathedral. I didn't realize this, Ari Spiro, but 800 years ago, they used a lot of French Jews to construct that cathedral, and I believe that's one of the reasons, at least from what I read, that they put the kings of Israel on one side of the building.
It could be. Listen, there were a lot of craftsmen. The Jews probably were involved in building the pyramids back in Egypt. And they were probably, they were good craftsmen.
Yeah.
And, But there's a blend of the Old and the New Testament. That's part of Western civilization, the blend of the Old and the New Testament, which, of course, the Quran comes to uproot. Christianity followed Judaism, and Islam really came to uproot it. And any references that they have basically is to rewrite the history. And they're not biblical people. Islam is a Quranic people. In the West, the civilization was made from the Bibles, the Old and the New Testament.
I completely agree, Rabbi Ari Spiro. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for being on the program. It's always great to have you.
Same here.
All righty. Folks, we're going to take a break. Again, the book, Pushback, Reclaiming Our American Judeo-Christian Ethos, Rabbi Ari Spiro. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
His name is John Tamney. John, welcome to the program this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Glad that you could take the time to talk to us. So tell us a little bit about this. What are your thoughts on these two picks?
Well, my first thought is I think we always vastly overstate the importance of the Fed one way or the other. And I think we insult ourselves when we pretend that we're reliant on a bunch of central bankers to enable us to achieve economic growth. And so that's the first thing I say. I think Jeff Bezos would have been great without it. I think Walmart would be the great story it is with or without a Fed, and so would have John D. Rockefeller. But I do think it's important that different voices basically be part of an entity that employs more economists than any other in the world. The monolithic view at the Fed is that economic growth causes inflation. How exciting to have Steve Moore and Herman Cain there who disagree with that.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back to the program. Let me tell you something. We probably won't ever really get to the bottom of exactly what happened. At least, in terms of the level of skepticism when a government tells you, what just happened. I mean, all across the world, there's always people that don't think they're getting the truth. So as a follow-up to our segment yesterday with John Tamny of FreedomWorks, the chief economist over at FreedomWorks, what we were talking about was Herman Cain and Stephen Moore and the importance that these two guys get on the Fed. Now, shortly after that interview, the news broke that Herman Cain had withdrew his name. So he withdrew his name from consideration. Now, who knows why? That this might have been because of the Me Too movement and what happened when he ran for president the first time. It could have been. Now, according to Herman Cain, he says that the Federal Reserve just couldn't afford him. That's according to reports. He's saying that he withdrew his name because he would be taking a significant pay cut, which is, I think that's understandable. This is America, after all, where at least we have one side of the political aisle that's not afraid to say they like to make money. But now that this has happened, and I'm just to be perfectly honest with you, now that Herman Cain has bowed out for whatever reason, it's relevant. Now they're going to train all of their fire on Stephen Moore. And that's why it's more imperative now than ever, in my opinion, for Stephen Moore to be confirmed to the Federal Reserve. I understand there were Republican senators that said they didn't like Herman Cain. I don't see how you can... notice the left, by the way. They didn't bring up that... you would think the left, because Herman Cain is black, you would think, right, the left would start attacking. But no, the left hates the idea of Herman Cain on the Federal Reserve Board, and that's why he's not going to be on the Federal Reserve Board. But now that Stephen Moore is the only one left, you're going to see the attacks ramp up even more. The headline, New York Times, as Herman Cain bows out of Fed contention, focus now shifts to Stephen Moore. So here we go. I mean, we'll see what happens. I will tell you this: Stephen Moore has been, he's been, in my opinion, on the right, on the conservative side of things. He has been a pioneer. He has been, part of this intellectual base on how to look at the economy from a free market perspective. This is something that we don't have at the Federal Reserve right now. And whether or not the Federal Reserve is significant anymore, as we interviewed John Tamny yesterday, is up for debate. I will tell you this: the Federal Reserve certainly thinks that they're significant in influencing the economy. Right now, you could make the argument that the American economy is doing so well in spite of the Federal Reserve and the things that they've attempted to do with interest rates over the last year. The things that, when they make a move, the market, do we really want it? And according to them, they're not political. But we established yesterday that that's ridiculous. The Federal Reserve is absolutely political. As a matter of fact, there are many people out there that believe that the Federal Reserve will, in fact, intentionally destroy the economy so that Donald Trump has a harder time being reelected because Donald Trump is such a threat to the status quo. There are people out there who believe that they're just biding their time and that next year there's going to be economic turmoil intentionally caused by the Fed. Now, you can go back and look at the Great Depression, and there's strong evidence to say that that was caused by the Fed. Not necessarily intentionally, but you can say the Fed did this and it destroyed the economy for decades. I actually hold to the belief that they are very powerful. I'm more convinced of that than not. And so that's why a guy like Stephen Moore, and that's why the left is going to try everything they can to destroy Stephen Moore and his reputation at this point. But anyway, we'll have more on that. Also, let's talk a little bit about highways in Arkansas, as well as what happens when you prove other people wrong and you are proven right. We'll talk about that as well.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
On occasion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly right. And, for a long time, I've said this before. I think I read this somewhere a long, long time ago. The Fed, tweaking those interest rates, like, with the precision that we would maybe tweak our thermometer in our homes. You know what I mean? As if they really are kind of the idea that is out there, John, is that they're in a way, these puppet masters and that sort of thing. But what part of the Fed is actually about the free market at this point?
You can't really say anything about the Fed is about the free market, and you hit on something that's important. The Fed tweaking interest rates. Let's remember, when we borrow money, we're not borrowing money. We're borrowing what money can be exchanged for. We're borrowing access to trucks, tractors, computers, desks, chairs, to human resources. The Fed can't increase or shrink that. And so this idea that we would give a bunch of Fed officials the role of setting the short rate for the cost of credit, on its own, it's not a serious one. And so I'm hoping within this also that we can just have a discussion. My view, I don't think the Fed is the source of all of our economic ills, but why do we have one in the first place? It serves no useful purpose. Why would we have those not close to the markets setting the price of one of the most important market prices in the world?
Here's the thing. They like to pretend. I mean, I've always heard, Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, the Fed is not about politics. They're nonpartisan. Is that true?
Oh, please. Of course they're about politics. When is it not about politics? There's this notion that this would be the first time the Fed has been politicized. It's always been politicized under Republicans and Democrats. And they're trying to say this time is different. It really isn't. People are human, hence they're political, and the Fed exists at the pleasure of Congress and the president. Of course it's political. Well, let's not pretend that this is a Trump thing.
Well, so then, obviously, then that's why it's important to have people, if it is political, if we admit that, if we, prove that as a falsehood, then we do need to have people that, right now, we have the political debate in this country is, do we believe in free markets, or do we want to, allow the government to force us to give all of them our money and divide it up equally, socialism? Obviously, those are kind of the two extremes. You can't believe you're even saying that. And so, if the Fed also is looking at economic policy from a political lens, I want some free market guys in there. I want Herman Cain, who's, run Godfather's Pizza. They act like that somehow disqualifies him, John.
No. Look, I think it's a very good point. I think that the only dispute I'd have with it, and it's in my columns about this, I've said I disagree with Steve Moore that having the right people at the Fed can somehow transform the economy, that somehow the Fed is the barrier to much greater economic achievement. I believe the economy is largely free market and works around this ridiculous institution we call the Federal Reserve. And it may interest you that I learned much of what I know about the Fed from someone who came up in business in Arkansas, in Jonesboro, actually, Hall McAdams. He ran Union Bank that began in Jonesboro. And he taught me this, that the idea that these guys could be controlling the levers of the economy isn't serious. If in fact the economy was run by the Fed, we'd be a very poor country, yet we're not. And so I just like the idea of having different voices there at the Fed to shake up what's become a ridiculous discussion.
So I see a headline. We're talking with John Tamney. He's the director of the Center for Economic Freedom at FreedomWorks, editor of Real Clear Markets, author of Who Needs the Fed. Let's actually talk about that book real quick. Who Needs the Fed? Do you think we should just get rid of the Fed?
Well, I do, and let me stress that it's not about getting rid of it because I think it's the source of all of our ills. I just think it serves no purpose for the exact reasons that you say. Okay, so the Fed sets the short rate for lending for banks, overnight lending, or at least tries to. Well, interest rates are priced like any other. You don't need the Fed to set that. We don't have people setting hamburger prices or the price of computers. Why do we need them setting the price for credit? The Fed is a regulator of banks. Oh, how'd that work out in 2008? It had massive regulatory oversight of banks, didn't have a clue about the problems within them.
Wow.
The Fed is a lender of last resort is supposed to be a lender of last resort to solvent banks.
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Last hour we talked about oil prices. We talked about Mexican soldiers detaining U.S. soldiers when they're on our side of the border. We talked about human trafficking being a $150 billion industry. We also talked about how Herman Cain has bowed out at the Federal Reserve. Now Stephen Moore really needs to be confirmed. And we talked to Rabbi Ari Spiro about, Ilhan Omar, as well as the Notre Dame Cathedral situation. So all that is in hour one. Go get the podcast, iTunes, SoundCloud, ConduitNews.com, YouTube. Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Let's start with this story. This was in the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Doug Thompson back on Sunday, April the 21st. The headline, Region Benefits from Session, Lawmakers Say. I'm going to skip down to, past this, let's see, what does it say? School facility funding. We're going to skip past that. We're going to go to the highways and taxes. Let's see what some of our representatives are saying. Legislatures interviewed from Benton and Washington counties each listed the state's $300 million highway plan as particularly important to the region. Doug Thompson writes, voters must approve much of the package. Interesting. Quoting the governor's nephew, the highway plan is probably the best news Northwest Arkansas got out of the session, Hendren said. More money for highways will be a major boon for the region, said Democrat Megan Godfrey. So we have Megan Godfrey and Jim Hendren excited about the highway plan. All right, we've got bipartisanship, Republican, Democrats, governor's nephew, president of the Senate, and Megan Godfrey, very excited. I'm just curious. We're broadcasting across the state of Arkansas. Who do you think has the best roads? What area, what region of the state has the best roads? I mean, if we held a competition or if we held a poll, who do you think has the best roads in the state of Arkansas? Keep in mind, this is the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. So these are Northwest Arkansas legislators commenting about taking more money for you to pay for even more roads. Quote, whether you're a driver for a business or just trying to get your kids to school, this was needed. Democrat Megan Godfrey from Springdale. Springdale, wow, they've got terrible roads up there. Then we have Senator Eads, who works for the Springdale Chamber of Commerce, said more money for roads had been a priority of the Northwest delegation since before he became a member of it. Okay. One of the main things, Doug Thompson writes, is there will now be a consistent source of money, assuming voters approve the plan, Eads said. The legislature approved an increase in fuel taxes, but a proposed half-cent sales tax increase requires voter approval. There's going to be a big push here to make sure the voters keep a tax that they voted to sunset. I think we should defeat it. What do you think? I think we should tell the Arkansas General Assembly that we already give you money to build our roads. We give you a lot of it. And if you look at the RDOT budget, folks, it goes up over the last 10 years. It has gone up demonstrably. And you can't argue with those numbers. They are getting more and more money. And yet, for some reason, they're underfunded. For some reason, we've had 6 years now, and we're just now getting the governor to give a little bit of general revenue into the, like other states do. So what we had in terms of highways this session was a manufactured crisis where people waited way too long to do something about this situation, and their only idea was more taxes. I want you to get creative. The people want you to get creative and quit going to the same solution, which is ask the people for more money. One of the main things, they'll not be consistent. Okay, both Godfrey and Democrat Nicole Clowney were critical of the governor's income tax cut. Let's move on to tax cuts. Quote, the cut reduced taxes for the 1% with the highest income, Democrat Clowney said, and earned income tax credit would have cut taxes for 10% of taxpayers. Interesting. Again, Democrat Nicole Clowney, a fan of earned income tax credit. The president pro temp of the Arkansas Senate, the governor's nephew, Republican Jim Hendren, proposed an earned income tax credit and got it passed out of the Senate, where it died over in the House. I just don't understand why we proposed that. Don't understand why we proposed an earned income tax credit when the Democrat Party is actually diminishing, and they keep trying to get this passed and they fail, and then somehow a Republican leader tries to ram it through. Unbelievable. Doug Thompson, the legislature also passed a series of changes to taxes on businesses. Now, this paragraph is rich. The revenue to be lost in Act 822 by Senator Bart Hester will be offset by collecting sales taxes due on internet sales from out-of-state supporters. From out-of-state supporters set. So this is interesting because they're saying that it's due. They're not really saying that we passed a new tax. They're saying, well, it's already due in your tax sheet if you don't pay it. That's not true, or you wouldn't have needed a piece of legislation to make people do it. The act reduces the state's top corporate income tax rate from 6.5% to 6.2% for income exceeding $100,000 for tax year starting on or after January 1st, 2021. Now, that's interesting. You would think if the things that are going to create the deficit, right? Because listen to this. The revenue lost. You're not losing any revenue until 2021. The revenue lost by Act 822 by Senator Hester will be offset. Okay, interesting. They're going to begin collecting your sales taxes in a couple of months, July 1. They're going to start collecting this tax July 1, but they don't take a revenue hit in this particular piece of legislation till January 1st, 2021. Listen to this. The corporate income tax cuts would reduce revenue by $9.8 million in fiscal 2021, $29.5 million in 2022, and $39.3 million in 2023. In the meantime, we're going to be paying internet sales tax immediately, which is one of the big contributing factors that if you look at the net tax increase, the reason it's such a net tax increase is they're collecting all of their taxes. The gas tax starts in October. Internet sales tax starts in July. Those taxes start pretty much immediately. You have to wait for the income tax cut. That doesn't go into effect for a little bit. You have to wait for the corporate income tax cut. But let me make this point again to you, just so you understand. I'm all for corporate tax cuts. I actually think you should have eliminated the corporate tax cut entirely and use the revenue loss there. You could just quit giving money away to Chinese companies. End the Arkansas Department of Economic Development, or whatever they call themselves now, and stop with the corporate welfare, and then just treat all corporations equally. And then you could really put up a sign that says Arkansas is open for small business. But I do have to point something out for you. The internet sales tax is a tax increase, practically speaking, on everyone. It's more money from our pocket on everyone. There's not a lot of people, there's definitely nowhere near a majority of Arkansans that have C corporations. This corporate income tax is for C corporations. It's going to be cut, and that's a good thing, but it's for C corporations. So all of us the whole of the people, poor, middle class, rich, we're all paying for the internet sales tax so that a few C corporations get to have their tax rate lowered by 1%. I just, we all want to talk about structure. We all want to talk about structure, right? We don't want to talk about the net tax increase in fiscal year 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. We don't want to talk about that. We want to say, but the structure is so good. The structure. The task force wasn't about structure. It was about task relief when it was originally sold, and then you made it about structure, and tax increases were put on the back burner. Or, I'm sorry, net tax cuts, net tax relief was put on the back burner. I mean, that's the way I look at this. So that's something. That paragraph there. There's so much context that's left out of that paragraph. There are other changes. Quote, your readers' eyes. Listen to this. This is a quote from Jim Dotson, who, by the way, Jim Dotson on Facebook. There's a Facebook post from Representative Jim Dotson that admitted there's no way around it. The people are going to be paying more taxes after the 92nd General Assembly closes. I mean, he admitted it on Facebook. You can go look it up. There are other changes. Your readers' eyes will glaze over if we get into the weeds of business tax calculations, but this is meat and potato stuff for businesses, Jim Dotson said of the bill's other provisions, including extension of the net operating loss carry forward period from 5 to 8 years. This is projected to reduce state revenue by $7.8 million. The governor's nephew, Jim Hendren, agreed. I know tax changes are not exciting, but the tax reform packages passed will be a big advantage to the state's businesses. Actually, that's not true. Tax cuts are exciting. Tax changes, as another way of saying, boy, if that's not some carefully crafted language, I don't know what it. Tax changes, if by tax changes you mean tax increases, are not exciting. Matter of fact, kind of maddening. I'm not excited that the people of Arkansas are going to be paying more money. I'm not excited that I'm going to be paying more money to the government when I purchase things on the internet. I'm not excited about it. I'm pretty disappointed and saddened, maybe a little angry. Now, if you want me to be excited about tax changes, that carefully crafted language, the definition of that phrase, tax changes, would actually be, well, I'm paying less. I'm paying less. I'd be excited about it, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you be excited about it because the Republican Party platform would actually mean something? Meaning we would have actually, we started voting for Republicans in 2010 in this state, and it would have actually meant something. Meaning, at some point in the last decade, we'd actually take the Republican Party platform, which has been, looked over. People have looked at it based on the ideas, and we'd say we actually changed the trajectory of this state that the Democrats had us on for 138 years, that it actually meant something. You're not for roads, Paul. That's what they'll say. You're for tax cheats, Paul. No, I am here simply pointing out the fact that the reason we had to go to the people and ask for more money for their cell phone bills, for 911, for roads, is because we have a unspoken budget crisis right now. We are running out of money. And instead of looking at serious spending reductions, we went through an entire session. And our leadership told us nothing to cut. You can't cut 1% across the board or 0.5%. That we went through an entire session, folks, where they said there is no spending. Now, I want you to understand how ridiculous that is. That there's not any measurable savings to be found in state government. They claim that their reorganization effort is going to save, at the beginning of session, that it'll save $15 million. But there was no basis for those numbers. They never could produce those numbers. They said, we think we're going to save $15 million. Okay, all right, that's great. I hope that's true. That's $15 million that we have that we wouldn't have had otherwise, okay. But I mean, if you talk to people who really know the budget down there, they'll tell you there's plenty of savings to be found. But they weren't willing to do that. Instead, they were in the business of lowering the income tax. Fantastic. But then they were in the business of raising taxes everywhere else. Net tax relief. The governor claims this session was the greatest of all time, and he said in a Talk Business article earlier that they are delivering net tax relief to the people of Arkansas. Folks, I'm telling you, I have seen the numbers. You even have legislators who are out there. There's no way you can make that argument. The governor's own agencies, the Department of Finance Administration's own numbers. By the way, we'll be releasing those very, very soon. The telephone number 870-275-9799. We've got to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
Well-run banks, but as anyone in banking could tell you, no solvent bank would ever go to the Fed for a loan simply because it's an admission of bankruptcy, at which point the Fed exists to prop up insolvent banks. How does that improve the banking system to be propping up the laggards? Everything about the Fed is either superfluous or it's damaging. So, yeah, of course, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have it. But I guarantee, look, Republicans and Democrats will never get rid of it. They love having a convenient whipping boy. Anytime the economy's weak, they can blame the Fed, which I think is irresponsible and it's untrue.
Interesting. That's yes, trying to escape political accountability. I hadn't thought about that aspect of it. Well, okay, so did I read some headlines where there were Republicans who were uncomfortable with a Stephen Moore or a Herman Cain pick?
Yes, you did. It's interesting that they're in particular uncomfortable with Herman Cain, and that's what I don't get. Herman Cain has long been involved in the monetary.
Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat-shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Dennis on the Facebook post, 415 million. I think Dennis submitted that number in terms of what the net tax increase will eventually be. I mean, you guys can go and get it yourself if you want, I'm sure, and do the math. Or Department of Finance Administration's own numbers. Let's see, what else do we have here on the Facebook post. You can check it out. It's facebook.com/ here it is. Facebook.com/Conduit News. I did get a text message about the $15 million. So the alleged $15 million savings in the governor's transformation bill. That could have been used to pay for John Payton's used car sales tax exemption. So right now, if you go buy a used car and it's under $4,000, you don't have to pay sales tax on it. Well, at the point of sale, that's probably what? How many times has that car been sold? How many times has it been taxed? Every single time, right? So they're saying, okay, it's been taxed enough already. So he wanted to raise that exemption to like $7,500, which would have been huge for low-income families who are looking to buy used cars, who are looking to get to work on time. All of a sudden, they don't have to pay sales tax on something that's less than $7,500. Well, it did get past the House. I mean, it had like 80 co-sponsors on the House. It got 90-something votes, I believe. Or maybe it had 90 co-sponsors and it got 80 votes. I can't remember. But anyway, then of course it dies over in the Senate side of things because, well, I mean, this has happened before. The leadership, the Arkansas Republican Party leadership, they don't believe that it's conservative to have a reduction of revenue from the people to the government without offsetting it somewhere else. Meaning that if you were going to, you had your financial impact statement, how much is this going to cost the state if we increase the exemption? The Republican supermajority, at least the leadership, they don't believe, and the governor has said this before, that it's not conservative to just cut a tax without raising it somewhere else. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he's saying. And that's what this whole session has been, except for the fact that they have raised way more than they've given back. They've raised way more than they've given back, and it's because we've got a giant government. This is all you need to know about Arkansas, right? We are 17th, according to the USA Today study. We're 17th in the country when it comes to the worst place to live in terms of tax policy, and we are 44th in the country in per capita income. So we're almost dead last in terms of the wealth of the average citizen, how much money they make, the average citizen, and we're the 17th highest taxed. I think those two numbers are directly related. I think it's because we're giving the government too much of the money, meaning we would be so much better off if the government were smaller. But when Arkansas's government runs on about $8,000 a person, and Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, all the surrounding states, they run about $5,000 per person. I think it's actually $4,000, but if you take out Texas, because people say, well, you got to take out Texas, that's not fair. Okay, well then it's $5,000. So the average state around us, running their government $5,000 a person, we're running $7,800 a person, and we're one of the poorest states in the country. I mean, I think those are related. And they need to do something to fix those problems. Look at sales tax. We've got one of the highest sales tax burden in the entire country. And that's when we're sitting next to a state like Tennessee that has no income tax. I mean, they may have a high sales tax rate, but they have no income tax. Well, we have both. Now, these are the fundamental problems that you could have addressed, but you didn't. You didn't. And the question is why? Everything that I've said since 2013 has come true. Okay? You expanded Obamacare Medicaid expansion, something that we could never have afforded. Any economic argument that was to the positive for the state has long since passed because we're past the 5-year window, which means we now have to contribute money. We have to contribute our share. It's no longer a free program. And exactly what I said was going to happen has happened. They're not coming to us saying, we really messed up. We really shouldn't have passed that program because we don't have the money. No. Instead, they're saying, we got to have money for highways. You want roads, don't you? They're not going to admit why we don't have money for roads because we had to spend money on this welfare program. They're not going to admit that. Instead, well, you know we need money for education, don't you? You're not against education. You're not against roads, are you? You're not against kids. You're not against families, are you? They're not admitting why we're in this position. And we're going to continue telling the truth. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. I'm going to tell you about Options on Main, a pregnancy resource center, when we return. Don't go anywhere.
Discussion. This isn't something where President Trump just picked him and said, hey, go on the Fed. This has been a policy area for him for quite a while, not to mention that he served as president of the Kansas City Fed. And so it's surprising that at least 4 Republican senators have said that they wouldn't vote for his confirmation. I don't quite get that.
Yeah, I don't either. We're seeing this more and more, and it's getting frustrating. Just in terms of with President Trump, he has more opposition from his own party than anyone I can remember. I mean, I'm only 34, John, so I haven't been politically conscious for a long time. But I do remember, when it came to things like this, if you were a member of the same party, you would kind of defer to the president. That's not happening anymore.
Well, and hey, as free market types, maybe we should celebrate that.
Correct.
I think anything that limits the power of people in the White House and or Congress is something that we should cheer on, and I'll cheer on this. I love a Washington that does very little. I love distracted presidents. Yeah. And so, the less they're doing, the better off we all are, simply because, an economy is not some blob that needs to be massaged. It's just individuals. Free individuals tend to prosper. And so I think it's important. I'd like to see different voices at the Fed, but I think our side should stress that let's not sit here and pretend that we need the Fed to prosper, because that I can't stress enough that insults what makes the U.S. great. The Fed is not why we're the richest country on earth. We have a Fed, the Fed is a consequence, I would argue, of us being the richest country on earth.
Interesting. Do you think that the Fed, you think that at this point we succeed economically in spite of the Fed's efforts sometimes?
Oh, yeah, without question. Now, again, if we did not have the Fed, I think few people would notice. And my sense is that the banking system would be much healthier, which, overall would be a good thing for the economy. Most credit occurs away from the banking system at this point. But, yeah, without question, anything that aims to distort the natural workings of the market holds back the economy. And the Fed is a shining attempt at government trying to distort what would otherwise happen in a free marketplace. So yes, we succeed despite a lot of things.
What do you? No way. I know this is a question kind of deviates from the Fed, but what do you think of the economic outlook right now? For the rest of this year, obviously the president says it's the fantastic economy that you have people in the
bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Joining us now in studio, I want to introduce you to Valerie Long. Valerie, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Valerie, you are the director of an organization called Options on Main.
Yes.
Which is a pregnancy resource center in Jonesboro. What can you tell us about that?
Options on Main has been in existence in Jonesboro since 1939, and all of our services are free and confidential to the public. We are a faith-based nonprofit organization, and we take no government money. We survive solely on private donors, churches, and businesses to keep our doors open. Yeah. And faithfully, folks have kept our doors open since 1930, or for 39 years, since 1980.
So, I'm familiar with the organization, and matter of fact, I've been to the event that you guys put on once a year, the fundraiser, and it's always really, really great. It's coming up on May the 2nd. Talk to us about that.
Coming up first Thursday in May the 2nd. This year we will have Gianna Jessen as our keynote speaker. Gianna is an abortion survivor. Wow. Her mother had a saline abortion when she was 7 months pregnant, and Gianna was born alive. And she is probably one of the most incredible pro-life speakers you will ever hear. Mm-hmm. She's got a wonderful testimony. She has spoken all over the world. She's addressed Congress. She was actually what prompted George W. Bush to write into law the, what's it called? the Born Alive
Okay,
Act.
the Protection Act.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting, the whole Born Alive issue, I mean, certainly has been in the news recently.
Yes.
You had the governor of North Carolina saying that a baby would be held comfortable, made comfortable, then the mother would make this decision. Now, the good news is I just came out of the General Assembly where I covered it for I guess since January 14th, and they're done. And we had some great pro-life legislation. We've got some people, I mean, this is something that I think Arkansas is in agreement. We've got abortion groups calling Arkansas extreme. So if pro-abortion groups calling Arkansas extreme, I think we're doing the right thing.
Yes.
So that's very encouraging. And so in light of that, though, in light of what New York is doing, saying that you should be able to murder a child, up to the very, very last day before it's born. You've got North Carolina, you've got other states doing this. If there is a worthy cause, you guys are saving lives. Roe versus Wade is still a thing, but you guys are saving lives because you're making relationships with young women who are in a very confused part of their life, right?
Exactly. And thankfully, Arkansas is the second most pro-life state in the nation, second only to Arizona. And I've been told that we're actually first now, just in the past few months.
Yeah.
No one wants to have an abortion. Nobody wakes up and says, I am going to go have an abortion today. These girls are scared. They're confused. A lot of them feel like a pregnancy may mess up their plans, or maybe it's not the right time, whatever. But we are there to let them know that there are other options and that they are cared for. There are people that love them, and regardless of what they choose, and we never coerce anybody to make a choice to parent or to place for adoption. But if they do choose abortion, we want them to know that we're still there for them, we still care for them, and we offer a post-abortive recovery and support group there.
What are the statistics on women who have had abortions?
Nationally, it's about 1 in 4.
Okay. So think about that. 1 in 4 women have had this procedure done, and a lot of them, from what I have heard, they regret it, especially if they go on to have a child later in life.
Yes.
And it is just absolutely emotionally vexing for them. And that's another part of the service. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's another part of the community service that you do here.
Yes.
Is coming around them and letting them know that there is forgiveness for this. So somebody's pregnant, they come in, let's say you have a young girl, she's pregnant and she's scared. She comes to Options on Main. What do you guys do?
Typically? Well, when she comes in, we do an intake form, and we kind of make the choice or the decision as to whether or not, she tells us rather if she's planning to parent, if she's possibly considering abortion, or if she's what we consider abortion vulnerable, which would be somebody who has no support at home, who's not married, who may not be working, or maybe, a very young teenager. They would be considered abortion vulnerable. Depending on how many weeks along they are, first we do just a lab-grade pregnancy test to determine if they do have a viable pregnancy. And if they are over 5 weeks along, then we're able to do a pregnancy test or limited ultrasound to determine whether or not they do indeed have a viable pregnancy. Okay. 80% of all women have a miscarriage at some point in time. And a lot of times women who may be considering abortion may have miscarried already anyway, or may be in that process of.
You ever encounter somebody who comes in dead set on an abortion, that's what they want, and then you guys offer them this ultrasound, and is there ever a change when they see the baby?
Absolutely. 80% of all women that see that heartbeat will choose life. They will. It makes all the difference.
Okay.
It puts humanity into their situation.
So that's an interesting statistic. 80% of those who actually see their child with the ultrasound, they choose life. So that's why you guys need to stay viable here. I mean, because and I want to make this point. You guys are attempting to save as many children as you can. by forging relationships with women who are confused or scared and they don't know what to do. They didn't plan for this.
Right.
And it's out of the caring. It's out of the. And it's not that you just care for the baby. From what I can tell, you guys genuinely care for this person who's in this situation.
Absolutely.
And they respond to that love. Most of the time, by saving the child's life, right?
Yes. And like I said, no matter what they choose, we want them to know that we're there for them before, during, and after whatever their situation is. And I mentioned, too, that, we rely solely on churches, businesses, private donors. The churches in our community truly are an on-ramp from us into the community for support for these girls. Like I said, we are faith-based. We do, and since we don't take government money, we do have the freedom to talk about church with them, to present the gospel, to pray with them when that opportunity presents itself. But there's only so much we can do in that hour of time.
Right.
And we rely so much on the churches here in Jonesboro, and we've got such a strong system of support. It's my prayer that every church in Jonesboro will be a haven for these girls. That's the first place people need to feel like they can go for support. And a no judgment zone. We tell people our center is definitely a no judgment zone, and we're there for them.
What about the guys? What about the fathers of some of these children? You guys have programs for them as well, right?
We do. We offer what's called an empowerment program. It is basically an 8-week parenting program, and we invite the men to come alongside their significant others or their wives to be a part of that. We invite professionals in the community to come in and talk to them about what to expect in labor and delivery, what to expect after the baby's born, child safety, nutrition. We even go into some basic finance classes for them, and some things that all of us take for granted that we assume everybody knows about. But just some basic parenting life skills. And along with that, we have a Bible study for them. But we've had some of the guys recently, one fella said, you know what, coming here and being a part of this and hearing what I've heard makes me see that I can be a good father, that I can be a good husband one day. And they see the importance of a God-centered marriage and a good family foundation. And truly that's what it all boils down to, is the breakdown of the family. That's what's caused all of this. And if this generation can truly grasp a hold of the importance of, how God intended the family to be, husband and wife, and to raise the children in a healthy, nourishing environment. But we definitely come alongside the guys as well.
I would add to that. I would say, one of the reasons God created the family, we forget that sometimes. It's from a biblical context, it's God that created the family, and He did it because it's the easiest way for Him to show His love. It's just the easiest way for you to love it's easier to love your family than a stranger on the street. It just is, right? And so God is easier to show His love by, the love for your children, the love for your spouse, and that sort of thing. And that's one of the ways you worship God. And the easiest way, that's why the enemy, spiritually speaking, that's why the enemy goes after the family, because they want to cut off the worship of the Creator, which is what we were designed to do. We're talking with Valerie Long. She is from Options on Main, a pregnancy resource center. It's based out of Jonesboro. You guys, I'm sure, service the region. Now, you have, do you guys still have the ambulance with the ultrasound in it? Is that still a thing?
We do still have capability of that. I'm going to get a newer unit.
Okay, you have some goals.
Yes, hopefully have that up and running again in the next year or so.
So the ideally what happens is you're able to take the ambulance that's equipped with an ultrasound and go somewhere else, make it mobile, go to a neighborhood and offer these ultrasounds right there. And again, 80% see the ultrasound, they choose life. So trying to, again, save as many lives as possible. Okay, Joe, can we throw the website up here? This is the website. It's JonesboroPRC.com. And you can see, how easy the website is. It's geared towards women who are scared. Am I pregnant? What are my options? It's even got a tab for men here. And so your big event is on May the 2nd.
Yes.
Where is it going to be? And if people want to come, I mean, is there still time to come?
It is going to be held at the First National Bank Arena at 6 o'clock May 2nd. As of now, I think that all seats are filled.
Good.
But
that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. There's always last-minute cancellations and that sort of thing. If anybody wants to call me at the center next week, and we can see if we have any seats left. But looks like it's a full house.
But people listening can always send donations.
Absolutely. And honestly, our faithful monthly donors are our bread and butter. That's what keeps us going. Mm-hmm. So, yes, we welcome that if anybody wants to contact me.
We've seen here. And there are pregnancy resource centers everywhere, okay, all across the state. So those of you listening, in Fort Smith or Little Rock or Russellville or Stuttgart, you guys know, that these ministries work. They're there, and you've got your Netflix subscription. I don't know what a Netflix subscription is these days, but a lot of times, it's negligible. If everybody were to just give the equivalent of what they pay for Netflix every month,
right?
It would go a long way. All that adds up, and every dollar helps. And Valerie, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing with Options on Main, and God bless you. And
thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Valerie Long, go to the website, folks, Jonesboro PRC, that stands for Pregnancy Resource Center. It's Options on Main, a pregnancy resource center, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Mainstream media that certainly don't ever report on that, especially if it's positive. What are your thoughts moving forward with economic growth?
I mean, it would appear that it's good, which is just kind of a throwaway line. I mean, if I could predict exactly, I'd be worth billions. But my view is that when people are free, their natural default position is growth. And so President Trump has been largely good on the economic freedom. I don't like the trade tariffs thing. I think they're dangerous. I think they're incredibly dangerous. But on the deregulation front, he's been very good. I think 22 regulations abolished or lapsed versus one new one, so very positive. The tax cuts should have been much larger, and he would have signed much larger ones. I blame the Republicans for that, but he did sign tax cuts. That's a positive. The dollar's value has largely been stable. Presidents get the dollar they want. Trump's been largely...
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Had a big show today. It's always great to have new guests on. We always really appreciate people who come in studio, who call on the phone. The Supreme Court of the United States. Supreme Court of the United States going to be taking up whether or not you can ask somebody if they're a United States citizen. Now, I want you to understand that this is incredible. DailyCaller.com, Kevin Daly. Trump's census citizenship question faces Supreme Court scrutiny. Okay. Asking somebody if they're an American citizen in the census. All right. Supreme Court scrutiny. Back on the 11th, I can't believe I'm saying this. Back on the 11th of this month, we had, according to reports, Mexican troops on our side of the border, on American soil, and they detained 5 U.S. soldiers. And again, we have a Supreme Court trying to decide whether or not you can ask someone if they're a citizen in the census. I just find those two stories to just paint a picture of absolute just bedlam. It's just chaos. We have lost the values in many ways. Now, the Supreme Court may very well make the right decision here, but the fact that we even have this, it's just everything is political. Everything's about who the next Democrat voting base is going to be for the next 50 years. Democrat states and city governments are challenging the citizenship question, fearing that diminished non-citizen participation will deprive them of federal funding and seats in Congress. Now, that is true. That's a legitimate concern. But if you're an honorable person and you have citizens who are being counted in the census and they're not really citizens, well, then, yeah, maybe you should lose a few seats in Congress and diminish California's massive congressional footprint. What do you think? 870-275-9799. Let's see here. Citizenship and other demographic questions have long been a part of the decennial census, despite their potential effect on response rates. That's according to Solicitor General Noel Francisco. The Commerce Secretary expressly acknowledged the very concerns respondents raised here, but made the policy judgment that the value of more complete and accurate citizenship data outweighs such concerns. He's exactly right. Don't you want to know? Don't you want an accurate or a more accurate census of who is actually a citizen and who isn't? I do. I certainly want to know exactly, or closer to an exact amount of how many people are in California. Now, see, the fact that the Democrat Party and these Democrat cities and these Democrat states are challenging this, to me, is showing their hand. Because we're now one small step away from essentially finding out that these illegals are also voting in elections. As a matter of fact, if you after the census, there might be some interesting data to now cross-reference on with voter rolls. I'm just throwing that out there. Who knows? Anyway, the U.S. Supreme Court taking that up, that'll be very interesting. Back on the Mexican soldiers coming across our border, being north of the Rio Grande, and detaining U.S. soldiers. This is now, by the way, go to the Conservative Review. We talked about this in the first hour, but we have one person who's at the border who's saying that they believe this was a political statement. His name is Zach Taylor. He's a retired 26-year veteran of Border Patrol who has formed a group of retired border agents to better educate the public about the border. Told the Conservative Review, he is convinced these Mexican soldiers were making a political statement. Quote, at the reported location, the Rio Grande River is distinct and easily identified in relation to the actual international boundary, asserted Taylor. That one of the supposed Mexican soldiers took one sidearm from an American and put it in the American vehicle is curious, as if the Mexicans knew exactly who they had encountered, where they were encountered, and were simply making a statement. What the purpose of that statement was is open to broad speculation, but on the face of it, this was probably political, as in showing that to Mexico, borders mean nothing. Taylor confirmed that he regularly saw this behavior during his time as a Border Patrol agent. Now, the next question is this. Now, these, again, were not National Guardsmen. These were U.S. soldiers from, let's see here. Not that National Guardsmen are not actual soldiers, but I'm not a military person, so I forgive my ignorance. But according to Newsweek, they obtained a copy of the report. The soldiers were, in fact, active duty members of B Battery, 1st Battalion, 37th Field Artillery Regiment. Okay? Not from the National Guard. They were they were a battalion. So I think that's a big deal. So the next question is, if you had one gun between 5 soldiers and they took, why are they, and you've got the Mexican troops who all have rifles, you can understand why you give the gun up, first of all, if that's your situation, right? You don't want a Mexican standoff, do you? And so, but the question is, if our troops are going to be put in this position, again, the United States border, all of our troops should be armed down there with rifles. They should all be armed with rifles. It's one of the most dangerous places on the world. Now, I know that would escalate the situation up, but if they are, you know what? If you stay away from the border, you got nothing to worry about. If you're Mexican soldiers, you got no business being on U.S. soil. Period. I mean, now, again, speculate all you want. What was it, an actual Mexican soldier, or was it cartel? You got to assume that the lines get blurry between soldiers and cartel and soldiers, and that sort of thing. You got to assume the lines get very blurry. Again, human trafficking is a $150 billion business that we know about. Human trafficking, $150 billion business, and a lot of people get smuggled across the border, and then they are never seen again. It's a huge business. Something to think about. Senator Brian King, former Senator Brian King, tweeted at me. Joe, do you see this? Can you throw this tweet up there for me? This is Senator Brian King. He tweeted a Thomas Sowell quote, which says this. So you can click on. Let's see. Yeah, let's see the tweet first. I know we've got a lot of push graphics and everything. Here we go. Now click on. Now actually click on the quote. Thomas Sowell. People will forgive you for being wrong, but they will never forgive you for being right, especially if events prove you right while proving them wrong. I think that quote alone is a true statement. It is describing the reality and the belief of the Arkansas Republican establishment today. They'll forgive you for being wrong, but they will never forgive you for being right, especially if you being right means that they look foolish. And they look like they've led this state in a bad direction. They'll never admit it. That's where we are. And that is a failure of leadership. We'll see you tomorrow, Arkansas. Be safe.